Behold, the KNCE broadcast board, destroyer of man, woman, and teenager alike, the bane of your DJ existence, and the most important thing to understand in the studio. This mixer has 4 channels dedicated to microphones. The first one is always going to be the main DJ mic. The next 2 will be color-coded to the interview mics. If everyone is comfortable with the board, we might even hook up a 4th mic. There are 8 channels dedicated to studio input. Channels 5 and 6 are aux 1 and 2. Channels 7 and 8 are CD 1 and CD 2, and now include auto start for the CD players. This means that when you press the program button for one of the CD players, the CD will automatically start playing and you won't need to reach for the CD player to press play. Channel 9 is the input for the 2 record players. You still need to use the DJ mixer behind you to mix and cue between the 2 decks. Channel 12 is dedicated to the automation computer. This channel should always be active and the fader should always be next to the markings that will be on the board. This board has a lot more buttons than our last board. It might be intimidating, but it's not really that much different. The most important button, the one that sends the channel to the program feed to be broadcast, is in the same place. For the most part, the buttons will be off or inaccessible. If you're not sure, don't touch it. On this board, each microphone channel has 4 buttons above the fader. There is a mic line switch. This button should always be active, which means the light on the button is yellow. The audition button doesn't do anything useful. The phone button is what sends a channel from the board to the person on the phone. And a cue button. The line inputs on the board also have 4 buttons, except that the top button on this channel switches between input A and B for each channel. Unless you know what you are doing, these buttons must always be set to line A, which means the light will be off. You also have audition, phone, and cue on these channels. The studio speaker and headphone controls are still all the way to the right side of the board, but it is now a little more condensed. The headphone volume is the lower red knob and will affect the volume for all the headphones in the studio, including the interview headphones. The top red knob controls the volume that goes to the studio speakers. This is your master output section. If you are not hearing anything through the speakers, your issue is probably here. In order to hear sound coming out of the board, you have to tell the board what to send the speakers. If all of the lights are off, nothing will be routed to the speakers. 99% of the time, you are going to want the program button to be active. That's the button that turns red when you activate it. You can ignore the audition button. The other button you will be using in the master output section is the cue button. This is the biggest change from the old board. In order to cue a channel, you now have to push the cue button on the channel and then tell the master output section to send the cue feed to the speakers. Again, you press the cue button on the channel, and then you press the cue button on the master output. If you have the program button active on your master output and you press the cue button on a channel, nothing will happen. Once you are done cueing your tracks, to hear the program feed again, you need to activate the program button. If you can't hear anything from the speakers, you either don't have one of the signals feeding to the master output, or you have one of the mic channels active. Other than the fader volume on a channel and the program button, nothing else you do on the board will affect the broadcast. The phone button is a cool new feature on this board for DJs who conduct phone interviews. The only channels that will get sent to the person on the telephone are the channels that have the phone button active. There will be a different video or written outline of how to use the phone hybrid, which is now built into the board. Now let's talk about my favorite topic, the levels. As a DJ, the most important job you have is to make sure the levels are as balanced as possible for everything you play through the board. And it's not easy. It's different for every single song, and it's going to be different for everyone you interview, so you need to pay attention to the meters at all times. Your job is to keep the levels as close to 0 without clipping into the red. That goes for all of the mics in the studio and every input running through the board. No red. For our colorblind friends, the last 3 lights in the meter are red. If your levels look like this, you are doing it wrong. The second set of meters is dedicated to a secondary output on the board. If you would like to see what levels look like before you activate a program button, you can do so through the control room output on the board. Any button that is active on this output will take over the meters on the select side of the board. For instance, if you press the Q button on a channel and then the Q button on the control room output, you'll be able to see their volumes without affecting the program feed. You won't be able to hear anything change on the studio speakers or the broadcast or the headphones. This is a separate output and it's not connected to anything, so it won't affect any of the feeds and you won't be able to hear it. That's all the fun stuff. Good luck.